Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we begin a gentle, long drift across the ancient arteries of connection and the vast winding pathways known collectively as the Silk Road. We will trace the quiet exchange of goods ideas and spiritual practices that flowed softly across continents from the distant courts of the Han Dynasty to the harbors of Venice. I invite you to share where you're listening from. Let the atmosphere of your own quiet room tone settle softly around us. Settle in now. Find warmth and soften your breath. Allow the weight of the day to lift from your shoulders. Remember, there is nothing to solve, nothing to resist. All the plans and tasks can wait until the morning light. Let my voice be your soft anchor tonight, guiding you into a deep, restful calm. We are drifting back through time, across ancient dust and high mountain passes under the deep expanse of the quiet night. Nothing in tonight's story will disturb your peace. Let the gentle greeting settle over you. Now allow yourself a long, slow breath in and out, releasing any lingering tightness. Imagine the air around you is turning soft like mist, post-moonlight, settling over the endless expanse of the Taklamakan Desert. We are entering an ancient myth-like cadence, where the vastness of geography is embraced with a sense of serene visuals. Time moves slowly, here measured only by the gentle footsteps of camels moving across the dune. Our journey will follow the faint winding trails, ensuring no tension interrupts your drift. If these gentle journeys help you rest, you may leave a soft like or subscribe, only if it feels comforting and natural for your night. Chapter 1. Origins, the distant whisper of silk and jade. We begin our long narrative at the ultimate origin, in the simple, misty beginnings of a connection that stretched the map of the ancient world. This is origins, the time before the road was officially open, when the quiet exchange was limited to the edges of great empires. The Silk Road did not begin with a grand decree or a single sharp act of opening. It began with the humble, beautiful product of the East silk. Imagine the process unfolding far away in the distant court of Han China, where the secret of the silk worm was a closely guarded, precious national treasure. The silk, with its soft sheen and shimmering texture, was a unique product of patient, slow cultivation. It was so light, so durable, that it transcended its use as mere cloth, becoming a currency, a diplomatic gift, and a symbolic change of status. Simultaneously, the Western demand for this exotic material grew a distant echo carried by nomadic traders from the Eurasian steppes. This early trade was not a continuous route, but a series of fragmented exchanges, with goods passing slowly, softly, hand to hand, across vast territories. The ancient roots of the road were driven by another essential quiet material, jade. For millennia long before silk, precious jade from the distant western mountains, specifically the region around Khotan, had been flowing eastward into China. The Chinese revered jade for its enduring hardness and perceived spiritual qualities, using it for ritual objects and high-status adornment. This slow, continuous flow of jade was the first quiet vein connecting these disparate lands. The geographical reality was dictated by necessity. The route bypassed the deep, forbidding mountain ranges to the south and the endless frozen expanses to the north. Instead, it naturally found a path through the long, narrow corridor of Central Asia, specifically around the perimeter of the formidable Taklamakan Desert. The name Taklamakan itself is often interpreted as meaning, "If you go in, you won't come out," underscoring the necessity of following established slow routes around its edges. This early period of origins was characterized by the quiet power of nomadic peoples. The nomadic tribes of the steppes, particularly the Xiongnu, to the north of China, were the first masters of the vast distances. They were mobile, resilient, and served as the initial intermediaries for any goods moving east or west. The Han Dynasty in China spent centuries dealing with the persistent, low-level military stress from these northern groups seeking to stabilize their border and control access to the profitable western regions. The foundation of the Silk Road was therefore laid by the confluence of three gentle, profound forces: Chinese silk, Central Asian jade, and the nomadic mobility of the steppes. It was a trade built on scarcity beauty and the quiet persistence of travelers following the most reliable paths through the ancient dust. Let the image of the shimmering silk and the hard, cool jade blend in your mind, symbolizing the preciousness and permanence of these earliest exchanges. Swanda Chapter 2. Formation, Zhangqian and the Gentle Opening. The fragmented exchanges of the earliest period, marked by silk flowing westward and jade flowing eastward, required a single purposeful act to establish a stable route. This formation layer begins with the famous early journey of a Han Dynasty official named Zhang Qian around 138 BCE. His journey was the single quiet trigger that transformed the scattered trade into the enduring Silk Road. Imagine the atmosphere in the court of Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty. The primary concern was the Xiongnu nomads to the north, whose persistent pressure caused immense strain. Emperor Wu sought a distant alliance with the Yuezhi people who had been pushed westward by the Xiongnu. The goal was political stability, not initially commercial gain. Zhang Qian was commissioned for this diplomatic mission, a long, arduous journey into the unknown heart of Central Asia. This journey was not aggressive. It was a diplomatic reconnaissance effort, an exploration of geography and culture. His journey was a gentle metaphor for patience, as he was captured by the Xiongnu early on and held for 10 years before escaping and continuing his mission. Zhang Qian's eventual return to China after 2 separate immense journeys, BC 138-126 BCE and c. 119-115 BCE, was the moment of formation. He failed to secure the military alliance with the Yuezhi, but his detailed reports provided the Han court with crucial, accurate knowledge of the geography, peoples, and resources of the western regions. His reports described sophisticated civilizations that China had previously only vaguely known. He spoke of Fergana in modern Uzbekistan, which possessed superior powerful horses known as heavenly horses, and the vast Daxia Bactria, which traded with India. Most importantly, he noted the consistent demand for Chinese goods and the availability of unique Central Asian and Western products such as alfalfa and grapes, which he introduced to China. This new geographical and commercial understanding initiated the official formation of the Silk Road. The Han government realized that trade was the key to stability. By establishing control over the Hexi Corridor, the long, narrow gateway leading west out of China, they could effectively manage both defense against the nomads and the burgeoning trade routes. The Han Dynasty began establishing a series of military garrisons and watchtowers along the route extending the softening filter of Chinese imperial security westward. These outposts were not just for defense. They provided predictable staging posts, water and protection for caravans, transforming the unpredictable journey into a routinized early journey of commerce. The trade route, though not yet named the Silk Road, that name would come much later from a German geographer, became a vital artery. The movement of goods, primarily Chinese silk and lacquerware, moving west, and horses' wool, gold, and glass moving east, was now systematic. This formation was built on the quiet understanding that political stability facilitated wealth, and that wealth further secured the frontier. The warm breath of exchange had begun to flow, connecting the vast distinct civilizations of the East and the West, setting the stage for the true long journey of the road. Chapter 3. Early Journeys. The Han Expansion and the Corridor of Wishes. The official opening of the road, spurred by the quiet diplomacy of Zhang Qian, initiated a true phase of early journeys as the Han Dynasty sought to control and stabilize the pathway westward. This effort was driven by a practical understanding. Reliable trade required stable geography, which necessitated projecting power across immense, challenging distances. The immediate early journey focused on securing the Hexi Corridor, the narrow, essential strip of habitable land that ran alongside the northern edge of the Tibetan Plateau. This corridor served as the throat through which all exchange between China and Central Asia had to pass. The Han achieved control not through mass military colonization, but through the patient establishment of a defensive line. They extended the Great Wall westward, incorporating a network of watchtowers and garrison posts. These structures were not just about defense against the Xiongnu. They were predictable lantern glows of safety, providing fresh water food storage and predictable staging points for the caravans. The gentle footsteps of the merchant and the soldier now shared the same road. The Han military presence in the corridor was a softening filter for the extreme dangers of the journey, transforming the route from a perilous nomadic trail into a predictable state-supported artery of commerce. As the road stabilized, the movement of goods intensified, leading to the first great exchanges. Silk, of course, flowed westward in ever-increasing volume. This silk was often exchanged for Central Asian horses essential for the Han cavalry, and a variety of other goods, including spices and high-quality glassware from the Roman-controlled regions of the West. The exchange was slow, patient, and highly segmented. Few, if any, merchants traveled the entire 4,000-mile route. Instead, goods were passed through numerous intermediaries. A Chinese merchant might travel to Dunhuang or Gaochang, exchanging silk for jade and Central Asian horses. The jade and horses would then be carried westward by Sogdian or Yuezhi traders to major oasis cities like Samarkand or Bukhara. Finally, these goods would be passed further west to traders who dealt with the Roman Empire. This segmented process ensured that the journey was not a sharp, continuous effort, but a series of overlapping, quiet local movements. It reinforced the idea that the road was less a single highway and more a network of intersecting wishes carried on the soft wind from oasis to oasis. The oasis cities themselves became essential anchors along this early route. Situated wherever underground water allowed for agriculture, cities like Khotan, famous for jade Kashgar and Turfan, grew into thriving cosmopolitan centers. They provided refuge from the ancient dust and the harsh desert, allowing caravans to rest, replenish, and conduct their crucial exchanges in safety. This phase of early journeys saw the first subtle flows of ideas as well. Along with the silk and glass, the early strains of Buddhism began their quiet, unhurried journey eastward from India, utilizing the very same trade routes established by the Han. The road was silently becoming a conduit for the spiritual as well as the material. The quiet Han stability was the necessary condition for this flow. The road was open, and the world was beginning to connect, one slow, measured transaction at a time. Chapter 4. Turning Points. The Han and Roman Connection. The quiet, systematic stability established by the Han dynasty along the eastern stretches of the road set the stage for the first colossal turning point. The establishment of indirect yet profound contact between the two largest organized empires of the ancient world, the Han dynasty in the east and the Roman Empire in the west. This connection transformed the Silk Road from a regional trade network into a truly intercontinental artery. This turning point occurred not through grand diplomatic journeys, but through the immense quiet demand for goods, acting as a relentless, invisible force, pulling the two distant worlds together. From the west, the Roman Empire developed an insatiable appetite for silk. The shimmering material was essential for displaying status among the Roman elite, leading to a steady, predictable flow of luxury goods eastward, and crucially, a large flow of Roman gold westward. The Romans, while deeply aware of the product, knew very little about its origin. They believed silk came from a mysterious people called the Seres, or Silk People. Their demand was so intense that Roman writers, viewing the outflow of gold as a national drain, quietly lamented the trade, highlighting the economic magnitude of this early connection. Conversely, the Han dynasty was primarily interested in securing military resources, particularly the superior heavenly horses from the Fergana Valley, but also imported high-quality glassware and precious gems from the Mediterranean world. These goods represented the best craftsmanship of the West, and flowed eastward in exchange for the silk. The geographical reality of this connection meant the softening filter was the vast distance. The Han and Roman empires never shared a direct border and rarely exchanged official state-level embassies. The contact was managed by the intermediaries, who lived in the core Central Asian oasis cities, principally the Parthian Empire and later the Sasanian Persians. The Parthian Empire in modern Iran and Iraq was the chief beneficiary of this turning point. They were situated perfectly at the center, controlling the flow of goods and information, ensuring that Roman and Han merchants rarely met directly. This enabled the Parthians to act as the primary middlemen, setting prices and maintaining the segmented nature of the trade. Their quiet dominance solidified the middle section of the road. A notable distant echo of contact occurred in 97 CE, when the Han general Ban Chao dispatched an envoy Gan Ying westward toward the Roman Empire, Da Qin. Gan Ying reached the Persian Gulf but was discouraged from traveling further by the Parthians, who exaggerated the difficulty of the sea journey, keen to protect their profitable monopoly. While Gan Ying failed to reach Rome, his journey confirmed the continuous nature of the route and the quiet, persistent rivalry among the middlemen empires. This early turning point established the essential rhythm of the Silk Road for centuries, an unbroken chain of commerce and cultural exchange driven by luxury goods managed by intermediaries and secured by the stable organized power of the Han and Roman empires at its two distant ends. The entire network flowed with the quiet, sustained energy of economic necessity. Chapter 5. Early Journeys. The Spread of Faiths and the Oasis Cities. The quiet economic artery linking the Han and Roman empires was now firmly established. This phase of early journeys was defined less by the movement of silk and more by the soft spiritual flow of ideas, particularly the eastward spread of Buddhism. The road, having been formed by merchants and soldiers, was now gently shaped by monks and pilgrims. Buddhism, originating in India, began its unhurried journey along the Central Asian trade routes as early as the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. Unlike goods which required physical exchange and often stopped at the Parthian intermediaries, the spiritual journey was continuous traveling with the individual. Monks and missionaries traveled with the caravans, relying on the predictable lantern glow of the oasis cities for refuge and patronage. These oasis cities, places like Khotan Kashgar and Dunhuang, were transformed into profound centers of cultural and spiritual exchange. They became essential anchors where the Buddhist faith took deep root before moving into the Chinese heartland. Imagine Dunhuang situated at the edge of the Gobi Desert and the gateway to the Hexi Corridor. Here, the Mogao Caves were carved into the cliffs, 1,000 years of artistic and devotional effort. These caves were not built quickly or dramatically. They were the result of countless individual acts of piety, reflecting the slow, steady accumulation of faith. The murals and sculptures within are a visible record of the softening filter applied to Buddhism as it absorbed and blended with Central Asian and Chinese artistic traditions. The architecture of the Silk Road cities also reflected this peaceful syncretism. Temples and shrines built by Sogdian merchants or local rulers housed deities from different traditions side by side. A statue of a local Central Asian mountain god might sit near a Buddhist stupa, demonstrating the tolerance and flexibility necessary for trade to flourish across vast cultural distances. The merchants themselves were key in this early journey of faith. The Sogdians, an Iranian people centered around cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, were the unrivaled masters of the middle section of the road. They were multilingual, highly organized, and driven by a quiet entrepreneurial spirit. They carried not only silk and spices, but also the diverse spiritual landscape of the West Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and later early Christianity, Nestorianism, and Manichaeism. This vast network of commercial and spiritual exchange contributed immensely to the development of Central Asia. The road was a soft wind, carrying technological knowledge, particularly in areas like irrigation, introducing new techniques to combat the ancient dust of the desert, and metallurgy, ensuring the continuous formation of new skills and wealth along the route. The legacy of this period was the creation of a vast shared cosmopolitan culture across Central Asia. The trade route was more than an economic highway. It was a complex system for the gentle, unhurried transfer of identity belief and artistic practice, shaping the spiritual foundations of the world's most populous regions. Chapter 6: Turning Points. The Han Collapse and the Age of Fragmentation. The serene, steady flow of the early journeys was anchored by the immense quiet power of the Han dynasty in the east and the Roman Empire in the west. As both of these great stabilizing forces entered periods of internal stress, the entire architecture of the Silk Road underwent a profound turning point, a shift from state-managed peace to merchant-led risk. The first and most significant change was the slow dissolution of the Han dynasty as 220 CE. After centuries of centralized rule, the dynasty dissolved due to a combination of factors: internal political maneuvering, economic strain, and the quiet rise of regional warlords. This was not a sharp, catastrophic event, but a lengthy, profound softening filter on state power, leading to centuries of fragmentation in China. With the collapse of Han authority, the secure Hexi corridor, the long gateway lined with watchtowers and garrisons, lost its central management. The political landscape shattered into smaller competing kingdoms. This meant the official state-sponsored softening filter for caravans vanished. The inevitable consequence of this fragmentation was that the journey became more perilous, requiring merchants to pay tolls, negotiate with multiple local rulers, and manage increased risk. This instability would have shut down a less resilient trade route. But the quiet, intense demand for silk and spices ensured the road continued adapting to the new reality. The next pivotal turning point was the decline of the Roman Empire in the West, which we observed in a prior journey. As the Western Empire faced economic weakness and internal strife, its massive, insatiable demand for silk and the corresponding flow of Roman gold slowly diminished. The economic energy of the Western terminus began to fade, affecting the pricing structure across the entire road. This dual decline of the two great imperial anchors resulted in the age of fragmentation along the road itself. The vast intermediate regions of Central Asia and Persia were now the dominant managers of the trade. The Sogdians rose to their greatest prominence during this period. They were the ultimate entrepreneurs driven by a quiet, deep-seated belief in commerce. They perfected the art of adapting to fragmented political landscapes, establishing widespread, resilient commercial colonies across Central Asia and into China. These Sogdian communities, with their common language and networks, provided the essential stability that the crumbling empires could no longer guarantee. They were the lantern glow of commerce in the distant night. This shift was a profound evolution of the road's nature. It ceased being a political artery and became a purely commercial and spiritual one. The soft wind of trade was now carried entirely by the patient resilience and adaptability of the merchants operating outside the predictable structure of unified states. The fragmentation in China also intensified the early journey of Buddhism. With the weakening of centralized Confucian orthodoxy, Buddhism flourished in the smaller northern kingdoms, finding new patronage among foreign rulers who had settled there. This spiritual flow continued uninterrupted, with monks and pilgrims like Faxian traveling westward to India in search of original texts, utilizing the very Sogdian networks that carried the silk. This period of quiet, decentralized management proved that the road's power lay not in the strength of any single government, but in the enduring, patient desire for connection and exchange. Chapter 7: Early Journeys. The Sasanian Interlude and the Rise of Spices. The age of fragmentation in the East and the decline of the West meant that the early journeys along the Silk Road were now entirely reliant on the strength and efficiency of the Middle Empires. This period was dominated by the Sasanian Empire 224-651 CE, the new Persian power that replaced the Parthians. The Sasanians were not merely passive intermediaries. They were active managers and profound contributors to the road's flow. Imagine the Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon near modern Baghdad as a massive, quiet hub of exchange where goods from the east met the demands of the Mediterranean. The Sasanians controlled the vital trade routes that connected Central Asia to the Persian Gulf and the Byzantine Empire. Their sophisticated bureaucracy and organized military provided a crucial, albeit localized, softening filter for the vast territory, ensuring the caravans could travel with predictable protection. During this time, the nature of the goods exchanged underwent a gentle evolution. While silk remained the undisputed king of the overland trade, the maritime routes began to rise in prominence, leading to the age of spices. The spice routes, often considered the Maritime Silk Road, flowed through the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. Spices such as pepper cloves and cinnamon were lighter, more valuable by weight, and easier to transport by sea. The demand for these goods in the Mediterranean and Europe was immense, driven by culinary needs, medicinal uses, and religious rituals. This shift introduced a new slow tide of commerce, adding a southern dimension to the traditional overland path. The Sasanians skillfully managed both routes, maximizing their profitability. Their ships sailed the Indian Ocean, facilitating direct exchange with India, which then fed into the overland routes managed by the Sogdian merchants. The Sogdians, functioning like the tireless, gentle footsteps of the road, carried the precious cargo silk spices and sometimes even the valuable Roman glassware eastward or westward across the challenging landscapes. The flow of spiritual ideas also intensified during the Sasanian interlude. Manichaeism, a new universal religion, founded by the prophet Mani, emerged from within the Sasanian Empire. This faith, which emphasized a dualistic spiritual struggle, was highly adaptable and utilized the existing Sogdian trade networks to spread rapidly eastward. For a time, Manichaeism became a significant spiritual presence in Central Asia and parts of China, traveling alongside Buddhism and Nestorian Christianity. The Sasanian period was a testament to the quiet power of geographical control and administrative stability in facilitating global trade. Their mastery of the central nexus ensured that despite the fragmentation of the Han and Roman empires, the warm breath of commercial exchange never ceased. Their vast, organized empire served as the necessary intermediary, a powerful, quiet anchor in the chaotic heart of the world. Chapter 8. Turning Points. The Islamic Awakening and New Roads. The Sasanian Empire, while providing stability, was itself approaching a profound turning point, a monumental shift that would fundamentally restructure the entire Eurasian trade system. This change arrived with the Islamic Awakening in the 7th century CE, which redefined the political, economic, and spiritual flow along the Silk Road. We view this period not as a sharp, sudden conquest, but as an evolution, a slow, systematic softening filter that created a new, vast, and unified political space across the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. The unification of these disparate lands under the caliphates, the Umayyad, and later the Abbasid, removed the multitude of borders, customs, and competing local rulers that had characterized the fragmented era. Imagine the effect the trade journey that once required negotiating with dozens of local warlords and shifting Sasanian and Byzantine border guards was now managed within a single, immense political and economic zone. This created an unprecedented level of security and stability along the central arteries of the Silk Road. The gentle footsteps of the merchant could travel further and safer than ever before. The Abbasid Caliphate, centered around the new capital of Baghdad, became the quiet, flourishing hub of this reorganized world. Baghdad, situated strategically near the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates, became the heart of the Golden Age of Islamic science, scholarship, and commerce. This city was the greatest single market the road had yet created, drawing in goods from east and west with immense quiet gravitational force. This turning point also brought about critical technological transfers. The most important was the introduction of papermaking from China. Captured Chinese artisans following the Battle of Talas in 751 CE quietly carried the secret of paper westward. This technology was quickly adopted and perfected by the Abbasids, leading to a massive increase in literacy bureaucracy and book production. Paper, light and cheap compared to parchment or papyrus, became the soft, essential medium for the spread of knowledge, a silent catalyst for the Golden Age's intellectual life. Furthermore, the focus on trade and scholarship led to the widespread adoption of Arabic as the language of commerce and learning, connecting the entire central spine of the Silk Road. Merchants, scholars, and pilgrims could communicate using a single common language, facilitating both economic exchange and the widespread adoption of new ideas in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The legacy of this Islamic awakening was the revitalization and recentering of the road. While the road had always existed, the caliphates provided the longest, most unified period of centralized security the trade network would ever know. The soft wind now carried not just silk and spices, but paper numbers, Arabic numerals, and complex scientific concepts across the vastness of Eurasia, connecting the ancient traditions of India, Persia, and China in a single intellectual flow. Chapter 9. Early Journeys. The Golden Age of Islamic Trade. The centralized political stability provided by the Abbasid Caliphate led to an unprecedented flourishing of early journeys along the revitalized Silk Road, marking the true Golden Age of Islamic trade, 8th to 13th centuries CE. The road's activity intensified and the movement of goods expanded far beyond simple luxuries. Imagine the city of Baghdad during this time, a colossal, quiet hub of exchange. Here, the vast economic energy was channeled through new financial innovations. The development of standardized contracts, partnerships, mudaraba, and sophisticated banking instruments, such as the use of sacked checks, made long-distance trade easier and safer than ever before. This financial framework was a quiet, profound formation that underpinned the immense flow of goods. The Sogdian merchants, while still active, were slowly assimilated into the larger Islamic commercial networks. The warm breath of Arabic language and Islamic law became the unifying factor for merchants traveling from the Maghreb, North Africa, to Chang'an, China. The nature of the goods exchanged became far more diverse. Alongside the flow of Chinese silk and Asian spices, which often arrived via the safer maritime routes, the overland road carried bulk goods and essential technology. These early journeys facilitated the widespread transfer of ceramics. Chinese porcelain, a technical marvel, flowed westward, influencing Persian and Iraqi potters, who attempted to replicate the delicate white glaze. Textiles. Cotton, developed in Central Asia and India, was widely cultivated and traded, gradually replacing flax and wool as a primary fabric across the Middle East. Paper, the manufacturing secret carried west after the Battle of Talas, quickly spread, creating a quiet revolution in administration, literature, and scholarship across the Caliphate. The gentle footsteps of these caravans also carried agricultural technology. Crops such as rice, sugarcane, cotton, and citrus fruits were introduced and successfully cultivated across the vast Caliphate, fundamentally changing the diet and landscape of the Middle East and Mediterranean. This agricultural exchange was a soft, silent evolution of the local economies, facilitated entirely by the safety of the trade routes. The spiritual flow continued unabated. This was the era of the great Islamic pilgrimage Hajj. The routes used for trade were often the same arteries used by pilgrims traveling to Mecca. This simultaneous movement of commerce and faith reinforced the unity of the Dar al-Islam, providing a shared spiritual purpose to the physical roads. This period was the realization of the road's full potential, a stable, predictable, and continuous artery that drove intellectual and economic advancement. The legacy of the Abbasid era was the establishment of a globalized trade model. proving that peaceful exchange, supported by unified law and finance, could transcend immense geographical barriers and serve as the true engine of civilization. Chapter 10. Early Journeys. The Tang Dynasty's Golden Balance. The revitalization of the central trade routes under the Abbasid Caliphate was met in the East by the greatest period of Chinese stability and cosmopolitanism, the Tang Dynasty 618-907 CE. This was a crucial phase of early journeys where the two most powerful organized empires, the Caliphate and the Tang, coexisted, maximizing the road's potential for exchange and cultural flow. The Tang Dynasty's capital, Chang'an, modern Xi'an, became the largest, most vibrant, and arguably the most cosmopolitan city in the world. Imagine the city under the distant night, a city of predictable order, where merchants from Sogdiana, Persia, India, and even the Arab lands lived and traded in specific regulated districts. The soft wind in the marketplace carried a multitude of languages and scents from every corner of Eurasia. The Tang court actively supported trade. They maintained strict control over the Hexi corridor and the western regions, ensuring that the gentle footsteps of the caravans were protected all the way to the major oasis cities like Kashgar and Turfan. This stability created an atmosphere of trust that facilitated the immense movement of people and goods. The legacy of the Tang era was the profound exchange of culture and religion within China itself. Buddhism, having traveled slowly along the Silk Road for centuries, reached its zenith, integrating deeply into Chinese society. Monks like Xuanzang undertook legendary early journeys westward to India, seeking original Buddhist texts, traveling across the stable networks that the merchants used. His return, laden with hundreds of scrolls, fueled a massive, quiet wave of translation and scholarship. The Tang court was remarkably tolerant and receptive to foreign faiths, reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of the trade routes. Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, Nestorian Christianity, and Manichaeism all established communities within Chang'an and other trade centers existing peacefully under the umbrella of imperial protection. This spiritual openness was a profound demonstration of the Silk Road's function as a conduit for ideas, not just commodities. Economically, the trade was balanced and predictable. Chinese silk, tea, and porcelain flowed west in exchange for horses, silver, wool, and crucially medicinal knowledge and new agricultural techniques from India and the Islamic world. The Tang dynasty embraced the foreign, incorporating new music, dances, clothing styles, and even new foods into Chinese life, a peaceful evolution driven entirely by the contact made possible by the road. The zenith of this exchange was briefly disturbed by the An Lushan rebellion in the mid-8th century, which we view as a misty recollection of internal political stress that temporarily weakened the Tang administration. This stress caused the Tang court to briefly lose control over parts of the western regions, illustrating that the health of the Silk Road was always dependent on the continuous warm breath of stable imperial power at its eastern end. Despite this setback, the deep-seated commercial structures and cultural openness of the Tang ensured that the road quickly rebounded, carrying the immense wealth of the East toward the flourishing caliphate in the West. Chapter 11. Early Journeys. The Uyghur and Tibetan presences, the established flow between the stable Tang dynasty in the east and the prosperous Abbasid Caliphate in the west, allowed new powerful regional players to assert themselves along the Central Asian sections of the Silk Road. These early journeys of influence, driven by the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, further diversified the commercial and cultural landscape. The Uyghurs, a Turkic-speaking people, emerged as a significant force following the decline of earlier nomadic groups. Their power base was situated strategically near the northern routes, and they developed an early profound understanding of urban life and commerce. The Uyghurs were not merely raiders. They were crucial mercantile intermediaries, mastering the art of brokering trade between the Chinese and the Western networks. Imagine the Uyghur communities settling in the key oasis towns, bringing with them a unique cultural synthesis. They adopted the Sogdian script and readily embraced the religious diversity flowing along the road. They became key patrons of Manichaeism and later Buddhism, building monasteries and temples that became essential lantern glows of spiritual refuge for passing merchants and pilgrims. The Uyghur language and commercial acumen provided a reliable, organized structure along the northern fringes of the road, contributing the necessary stability that the Tang sometimes struggled to maintain after internal political stress. Simultaneously, the Tibetan Empire, rising from the high forbidding plateau, began to exert its own influence. While the Tibetans were geographically more isolated, their expansion during the 7th and 8th centuries brought them into direct contact with the Silk Road, particularly along the southern edges of the Hexi Corridor. The Tibetan presence represented a subtle yet powerful softening filter on the Chinese control of the western routes. Their temporary control of key regions sometimes disrupted the movement of goods, forcing merchants to find alternative paths. However, this disruption also facilitated the flow of Tibetan goods such as wool, medicinal herbs, and crucially Tibetan Buddhism, which quietly began its own journey of exchange with Chinese and Central Asian schools of thought. The competition and cooperation among the Tang and the Uyghurs and the Tibetans defined this era of early journeys in Central Asia. The road became a complex political and commercial braid rather than a single straight line. Merchants had to be adaptable, navigating shifting alliances and regional authorities, but the universal language of commerce, silver, and silk ensured that the soft wind of trade never ceased flowing. This period proves that the success of the Silk Road was never dependent on a single political power controlling the entirety of the route. Instead, its resilience lay in the decentralization of responsibility, where different groups, Chinese, Uyghur, Sogdian, and Tibetan, each contributed their strength and specialization to maintain the immense long artery of exchange. The movement of goods and ideas flowed with the slow tides of regional power shifts, always seeking the path of least resistance. Chapter 12. Turning Points. The Song Dynasty and the Maritime Shift. The stability along the central overland route, managed by the Caliphates and the Uyghurs, was soon met by a profound structural turning point within China itself. The rise of the Song Dynasty, 960–1279 CE. This shift was not dramatic, but a gradual evolution that redefined China's relationship with the outside world, subtly pushing the focus of global trade from the dusty overland paths to the vast open maritime routes. The Song Dynasty was a period of immense technological advancement and economic dynamism within China, often considered the height of its pre-modern sophistication. However, politically, the Song struggled to maintain the vast territorial control over Central Asia that the Han and Tang had enjoyed. Loss of control over the Hexi Corridor and the northern steppe regions meant the traditional secure overland Silk Road was now geographically more fractured and perilous than before. This quiet political reality led to the greatest turning point in the road's history, the intentional and systematic shift towards sea trade. The Song government, realizing the difficulty and expense of managing the overland routes and negotiating with various northern nomadic groups, turned its economic energy eastward and southward, embracing the ocean. Imagine the bustling, quiet harbors of coastal cities like Quanzhou and Guangzhou. These harbors became the new primary conduits for Chinese commerce. The development of advanced shipbuilding, the massive, sturdy junks, the widespread use of the magnetic compass for navigation, and the creation of highly efficient coastal administration made sea travel safer, faster, and more profitable for carrying bulk goods. This maritime shift created a second parallel Silk Road, the Maritime Spice Route. Goods flowed from China to Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, and ultimately Egypt and the Mediterranean. This route was far more efficient for transporting heavy, high-volume goods like ceramics and spices, which were immensely popular in Europe. The shift had a profound legacy on the overland route. While the traditional road did not cease to exist, its primary function subtly changed. It remained vital for the most expensive, lightest goods, silk and jade, and critically for the exchange of ideas and spiritual practices, which could not be carried efficiently by ship. The overland route became specialized, relying on the tireless, gentle footsteps of the Central Asian merchants, while the maritime route handled the volume of global commerce. The Song dynasty also introduced revolutionary financial tools like paper money and bills of exchange, which further fueled the domestic economy and made international transactions smoother. This focus on internal economic strength and external maritime efficiency was a quiet, profound softening filter on the chaos of the overland political environment. The era of the Song marked the beginning of a long, slow period, where the soft wind of global trade was increasingly carried across the water, though the ancient paths over the ancient dust still hummed with the quiet flow of culture and faith. Chapter 13. Early Journeys. The quiet maritime growth. With the political turbulence along the northern borders of the Song dynasty and the continued vitality of the Abbasid Caliphate, the emphasis of the early journeys shifted decisively to the sea. This was a long, quiet, and profound period where the maritime routes, initially focused on spices, matured into a sophisticated network of global exchange. The maritime Silk Road became the true engine of Eurasian commerce during this time. The Song dynasty established elaborate maritime trade offices, shiboshi, in coastal cities like Quanzhou and Guangzhou. These offices were not just customs posts. They provided sophisticated legal frameworks, harbor security, and standardized currency exchange, acting as a powerful softening filter for international trade. This governmental organization maximized efficiency and profitability, drawing merchants from across the Indian Ocean. Imagine the atmosphere in the harbor of Quanzhou, no longer dominated by the ancient dust of the caravan, but by the distant waves and the rhythmic sound of sailors loading cargo. The ships were massive, technologically advanced junks capable of carrying hundreds of tons of goods, far surpassing the capacity of a camel caravan. This increase in volume meant that goods previously considered luxury items, such as certain silks and porcelains, could now be traded in larger quantities, reaching wider markets. The central hubs of this maritime network were not defined by desert oases, but by strategic ports across the Indian Ocean. Calicut in India, Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, and Aden on the Arabian Peninsula became essential anchors. The flow of commerce was regulated by the predictable patterns of the monsoon winds, setting a natural, unhurried schedule for global shipping. The legacy of the Islamic Golden Age also flowed powerfully into the maritime world. Arab, Persian, and Indian merchants, using advanced navigational tools like the astrolabe and sophisticated financial instruments like the sak or check, effectively controlled the Indian Ocean trade. They were the key carriers, using the warm breath of Arabic as the trade language from China to East Africa. This shift had a crucial impact on the overland routes. The gentle footsteps of the camel caravans did not disappear, but their purpose became specialized. The overland route remained vital for the fastest movement of diplomatic communications, highly valuable medicinal herbs, and critically spiritual pilgrimages. Monks and travelers continued to cross Central Asia, but the bulk movement of heavy commodities had irrevocably been assigned to the sea. The quiet, systematic growth of the maritime Silk Road created the necessary economic infrastructure that would eventually fund the massive military ambitions of the next great power to rise in the East, a power that would briefly unify the entire overland route under a single, formidable, yet centralized authority. The slow tides of global commerce were laying the groundwork for a massive political transformation. Chapter 14. Turning Points. The Mongolian Gale and the Grand Unification. The slow, steady growth of the maritime routes and the peaceful flourishing of the Abbasid Caliphate were abruptly met by the most immense turning point in the history of the Silk Road: the rise and expansion of the Mongol Empire in the 13th century. This was not a gradual shift. It was a vast, rapid transformation that redefined the political geography of Eurasia. We view this period not through the lens of conflict, but as a gentle metaphor for a powerful, unstoppable gale that swept across the continent, clearing away the fragmented local powers and establishing a single unified political authority from China to Eastern Europe. The central figure in this transformation was Genghis Khan and his successors, who methodically carved out the largest contiguous land empire in world history. Before the Mongols, the overland trade had been subject to endless tolls, customs, and regional dangers posed by numerous local rulers, the fragmented legacy of the earlier periods. The turning point occurred because the Mongol Empire, once unified, imposed a single coherent administrative system across its vast territory, often referred to as the Pax Mongolica. This was a quiet, profound act of centralization that dramatically reduced the cost and danger of long-distance trade. Imagine the effect on the merchant. The multitude of local taxes and required negotiations were replaced by a single imperial authority and a unified system of tariffs. The Mongols actively protected the trade routes, realizing that commerce and the subsequent revenue were vital to the health of their immense dominion. The ancient dust settled, and the roads became safer and more predictable than they had been since the days of the Han Dynasty. This grand unification did not destroy the existing commercial structures. Rather, it leveraged and maximized them. The gentle footsteps of the merchant could now travel the entire breadth of Asia, from the ports of the Black Sea to the cities of China, under the authority of the Khan's passport system, paisa. The immediate legacy was a massive surge in overland trade. Goods technology, and crucially people, began moving across Eurasia with unprecedented freedom. This era became famous for its travelers, such as the Venetian merchant Marco Polo, who embarked on his journey eastward during this time, and the Moroccan legal scholar Ibn Battuta, who traveled across the vast Islamic world. Their journeys, enabled by the security of the Pax Mongolica, showcase the immense reach and integration of the newly unified road. However, this turning point also carried a subtle darker side, viewed here as a misty recollection of unintended consequences. The very efficiency and stability of the unified road, which facilitated the movement of goods and ideas, also facilitated the widespread, rapid movement of pathogens. The seamless connection of previously isolated ecological zones was a slow, invisible catalyst for the eventual global spread of the Black Death in the following century. The Mongol era was a final, brilliant, yet fleeting achievement for the Overland Silk Road. It demonstrated the ultimate potential of the ancient route, confirming that when stability was imposed, the flow of culture and commerce was limitless. Chapter 15. Early Journeys. The Pax Mongolica in Practice. The grand unification under the Mongol Empire initiated a crucial phase of early journeys defined by the practical reality of the Pax Mongolica. This was the time when the long-dreamed-of possibility of traveling across Eurasia under a single political banner became a seamless, soft transition. The core of this era's success was the YAM system, which was not a physical road, but a logistical network. The Mongols established a massive system of official staging posts and courier relays across their entire empire. This system, originally designed for rapid military and political communication, was also utilized by accredited merchants and travelers carrying the imperial paisa passport. Imagine the efficiency. A traveler could ride westward from Beijing or eastward from the Black Sea, finding predictable supplies, fresh horses, and secure lodging at regular intervals. This vast, centralized logistics network was the greatest softening filter for the dangers of the journey the Silk Road had ever known. The gentle footsteps of the merchant were now guided by the efficiency of imperial communication. This stability fueled a massive flow of people and ideas. Unlike earlier periods where exchange was primarily limited to goods passing through intermediaries, the Pax Mongolica facilitated direct interaction. Scholars, artisans, religious leaders, and administrators moved freely across the continent, enabling a profound level of cultural exchange. The most famous of these early journeys was that of Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant who traveled the entire overland route eastward to the court of Kublai Khan in China. His journey, lasting over 2 decades, was entirely dependent on the security and logistical support provided by the Mongol system. His account, Il Milione, was a record of this unbroken connection, documenting the wealth, cities, and customs across the unified continent, and serving as a later catalyst for European interest in the East. Simultaneously, the vast Islamic world, though initially conquered, was integrated into the exchange. Scholars like Ibn Battuta, who traveled extensively throughout the Mongol successor states the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde, found the legal and commercial structures stable enough to allow for immense personal journeys spanning thousands of miles. This period was characterized by technological transfer on a colossal scale. Chinese inventions such as gunpowder, the printing press, woodblock printing, and advanced navigational instruments flowed swiftly westward into the Middle East and Europe, where they would later be adapted and refined. The warm breath of innovation traveled faster than ever before. The legacy of the Pax Mongolica in practice was the brief realization of a unified Eurasia. It proved the immense potential for globalization when political barriers are removed, leading to a golden, though short-lived age of intellectual and commercial connectivity. This era of immense security, however, was fundamentally dependent on the continuous authority of the Mongol Khans, a stability that, like all great imperial moments, was inherently fragile. Chapter 16. Turning Points. The fragmentation of the Mongol power. The magnificent security of the Pax Mongolica, which allowed for such seamless early journeys, was a temporary phenomenon inherently dependent on the unity of the imperial family. This massive centralized power was soon met by its inevitable turning point, a gradual internal fragmentation that was non-violent in its initial stages, but profoundly affected the flow of the Silk Road. The empire, vast beyond measure, proved too large to be governed as a single unit once the unifying will of the immediate successors to Genghis Khan diminished. It naturally fractured into a series of successor states, or Khanates, the Golden Horde in the west, the Ilkhanate in the Middle East, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. This softened historical shift meant that the entire overland route, which had briefly enjoyed a single unified authority, was once again segmented. Merchants now had to deal with multiple rulers, separate customs, and distinct tax administrations. The singular security framework dissolved, and the gentle footsteps of the traveler had to navigate a more complex political terrain. The core of the fragmentation was ideological. The Western Khanates, such as the Ilkhanate, which controlled Persia and Mesopotamia, rapidly adopted Islam, integrating into the existing cultural and religious milieu of the region. Meanwhile, the Yuan dynasty in China remained rooted in the East, following Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese imperial tradition. This religious and cultural divergence replaced the unifying political purpose of the earlier Mongol state. This political shift led to a crucial turning point in the economic viability of the overland trade. As the successor states began to engage in localized struggles, the distant echoes of internal tension, a continuous protection offered during the unified Pax Mongolica, faded. The risks increased, and the costs of transportation rose due to multiple tolls and the need for greater security on the trails. The legacy of this fragmentation was that the overland Silk Road's advantage, its safety and efficiency, was rapidly undermined. This made the established maritime Silk Road the spice route, which had continued to grow under the protection of sophisticated harbor cities like Quanzhou, increasingly attractive for bulk goods. However, the Mongol interlude left an indelible mark. The vast exchange of ideas, technology, and culture that occurred during the brief period of unification had already set in motion profound changes across Eurasia. The warm breath of knowledge, particularly in cartography, postal systems, and military technologies, continued to diffuse, carried by the scholars and artisans who had settled across the various Khanates. The political decline of the overland road was a slow, inevitable process, proving that while a single authority could create a boom in connectivity, The fragmented landscape of Eurasia always tended toward regional independence. The quiet age of seamless travel was over, and the Silk Road was returning to its decentralized, complex nature. Chapter 17. Legacy. The long echoes of the Pax Mongolica. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. Though ending the period of centralized security, paradoxically sealed the legacy of the Pax Mongolica. The softening filter of Mongol rule had achieved profound and lasting integration that political divisions could not undo entirely. This era's influence continued to flow with a soft wind across the successor states, even as they began to pursue different regional interests. The most vital legacy was the permanent acceleration of cultural synthesis. During the unified period, artisans, scholars, and scientists, especially those under the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Yuan dynasty in China, had worked together, leading to significant advancements. The Persian astronomers and mathematicians incorporated Chinese cosmological models, while Persian medical texts were translated and studied in China. This intellectual exchange was a quiet transition that fostered a globalized scientific community. Concepts like the Arabic numeral system and advancements in trigonometry already flowing from the Islamic world were perfected and transmitted eastward, finding their way into the Chinese bureaucratic and engineering systems. The legacy of the Mongol era trade also manifested in the dramatic shift in disease ecology, which we view as a misty recollection of unintended consequences. The immense seamless connectivity of the road ensured that when the Black Death originated in Central Asia in the mid-14th century, it moved with terrifying speed along the existing well-maintained trade arteries. The efficiency of the Pax Mongolica, which had facilitated the movement of silk and spices, now facilitated the global spread of the plague, profoundly reshaping the demographics and economies of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. This tragedy, while immense, accelerated social and economic changes that were already underway, leading to the decline of feudalism in the West. The final legacy was the increased European awareness of the East. The detailed accounts of travelers like Marco Polo and the widespread use of Persian and Arabic maps, which incorporated information gathered under Mongol protection, fueled European curiosity. This curiosity, though briefly paused by the chaos of the plague, provided the eventual spiritual catalyst for the age of global exploration that would follow. The idea of the East as a source of immense wealth and exotic goods, carried on the warm breath of these travel accounts, became a fixed part of the European imagination. Thus, the Mongol era, despite its political volatility after fragmentation, permanently altered the course of history. It functioned as a great mixer, blending the cultural, intellectual, and even biological landscapes of Eurasia. Even as the ancient dust settled over the unified empire, the seeds of globalization had been firmly planted, ready to sprout in new forms in the centuries to come. Chapter 18. Legacy. The rise of Timur and the last Central Asian flourishing. The political fragmentation of the Mongol successor states, while disrupting the grand unity, led to a final brilliant legacy of centralized power along the overland route, the rise of Timur or Tamerlane and the Timurid Empire in the late 14th century. Timur, a highly educated Turco-Mongol conqueror, was obsessed with restoring the glory of the Pax Mongolica. We view his rise not as a sharp, tense military narrative, but as a distant echo of unification, a final, intense spasm of centralized control in Central Asia. Timur's immense empire temporarily spanned Persia, Mesopotamia, parts of India, and Central Asia, effectively creating a powerful new softening filter over the main arteries of the Silk Road. The true legacy of the Timurid era was cultural and intellectual, centered around his capital city, Samarkand. Timur and his successors invested enormous resources, not in trade protection, which was inherently unstable due to constant campaigning, but in scholarship, architecture, and art. Samarkand became the final magnificent formation of a cosmopolitan Silk Road city. Artisans, scholars, and scientists were brought from across the immense empire to adorn the city. The Timurids sponsored massive building projects, mosques, madrasas, schools, and astronomical observatories, all decorated with sophisticated colored tile work and calligraphy. This quiet, intense flourishing of architecture and art demonstrated the fusion of Persian Islamic and Mongol artistic traditions that the Silk Road had facilitated over centuries. The legacy of Timurid rule also lay in its profound commitment to astronomy and mathematics. Timur's grandson, Ulugh Beg, established a famous observatory in Samarkand, which became the most advanced scientific institution of its time. Ulugh Beg meticulously created astronomical tables, continuing the scientific warm breath of knowledge that had flowed eastward from the ancient Babylonian and Islamic traditions. This scientific work was a direct, profound contribution of the Silk Road's intellectual exchange. Economically, the Overland Road continued its function, but its stability was always reliant on the personal strength of the ruler. Trade flowed, bringing Chinese porcelain and silk to the west, but the overall volume was increasingly being siphoned by the safer, more reliable maritime Silk Road. The gentle footsteps of the caravans were still present, but their risk had grown due to political volatility. This Timurid period served as the last great centralized hurrah for the Central Asian part of the road. It confirmed the immense cultural wealth the road had created, preserving the ancient roots of scholarship and art before the final ultimate turning point that would redefine global connectivity forever. Chapter 19. Turning Points. The final closure of the land routes. The magnificent legacy of the Timurid Empire was the last great formation of centralized power in Central Asia. Its eventual decline marked the final decisive turning point for the Overland Silk Road. The period of quiet, systematic closure that pushed global trade irreversibly onto the sea routes. The decline was not marked by a single event, but by two powerful long-term processes acting as softening filters on the overland network's viability, political fragmentation, and technological innovation. First, the political fragmentation of the Timurid successor states led to a return of decentralized control. The ancient problem of multiple tolls, local banditry, and shifting alliances re-emerged, making the immense overland journey increasingly risky and expensive. The political vacuum was eventually filled by regional entities, notably the Ottoman Empire in the west and the Safavid Empire in Persia, who often found themselves in conflict. This rivalry made the passage of goods through the vital Middle Eastern nexus unreliable and complicated as goods from the east became subject to political embargoes or massive tariffs. Second, the simultaneous and immense technological evolution in European shipbuilding made the long-held supremacy of the overland route obsolete. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, European powers driven by the legacy of accounts like Marco Polo's and seeking to bypass the costly Middle Eastern middlemen began funding oceanic exploration. This led to the quiet, profound achievement of Vasco da Gama, sailing around Africa's Cape of Good Hope and reaching India directly in 1498. This direct maritime connection was the ultimate turning point. The sea route could carry hundreds of tons of spices and porcelain with greater safety, speed, and efficiency than any camel caravan. It avoided the numerous intermediaries and the volatile political landscape of Central Asia. The sheer economic logic of the ocean trade proved irresistible. Imagine the economic shift. The overland merchants, whose gentle footsteps had defined trade for centuries, could not compete with the slow tides of the massive European carracks. The traditional Silk Road became increasingly marginalized, used only for localized trade or the movement of specialized, highly valuable goods, and critically for the continued flow of spiritual pilgrimages. The legacy of this closure was the end of Central Asia as the quiet cosmopolitan center of global exchange. The cities that had glowed like lantern glows along the desert's edge, Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, entered a long, slow period of economic decline, their primary function absorbed by the coastal ports of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The final closure was a soft transition completed over centuries, but the warm breath of global trade had decisively shifted from the ancient dust of the steppes to the vast expanse of the sea. The road did not die in a single battle. It was simply superseded by a superior, unexciting logistical solution. Chapter 20. Legacy, the enduring soul of the Silk Road. We arrive now at the final chapter of our long, slow journey across the ancient arteries of connection. The political life of the overland Silk Road has been superseded by the ocean, but this final phase focuses on the enduring legacy, the profound quiet and lasting echoes of the road that continue to shape our world. The legacy of the Silk Road is found in the permanent fusion of cultures and the creation of a globalized intellectual world. The physical trade routes may have faded into ancient dust, but the ideas they carried became fundamental to the world's development. The most essential legacy is the diffusion of technology. The road acted as the world's first major innovation highway. In addition to silk spices and paper, the soft wind carried gunpowder. Though Chinese in origin, the knowledge was refined and utilized by the Islamic and European empires, fundamentally altering warfare and engineering. Printing woodblock, printing, and later the adaptation of movable type were transmitted westward, leading to the information revolution of the Renaissance. Agronomy, the exchange of crops like cotton, sugar, and various fruits across continents, permanently diversified agricultural practices and global diets. The second profound legacy is the spiritual tapestry of Eurasia. The road was a softening filter for religious doctrines, ensuring that faiths like Buddhism, Manichaeism, Nestorian Christianity, and Islam were all carried, adapted, and integrated into new cultural contexts. The coexistence and syncretism observed in the oasis cities created a template for religious tolerance and cultural exchange across vast distances. The architectural splendor of the surviving mosques and monasteries along the route from Samarkand to Dunhuang stands as a silent, powerful testament to this spiritual flow. The third legacy is the memory of connection. The European age of exploration, which ultimately closed the overland road, was paradoxically fueled by the road itself. The accounts of travelers like Marco Polo created an indelible lantern glow in the European imagination, confirming the immense wealth and sophistication of the East. This desire to connect with the source of silk and spices directly was the spiritual catalyst that led to the discovery of new sea routes and ultimately the creation of a truly globalized world. The Silk Road teaches us that true connection is measured not in the distance traveled, but in the enduring quality of the exchange. The road did not die. It simply dissolved its physical form and merged into the wider, faster flows of oceanic commerce. The gentle footsteps of the ancient merchant, the monk, and the pilgrim have long since vanished, but the warm breath of their exchange continues to circulate in our languages, our foods, and our shared systems of thought. The great artery of Asia, built on silk and dust, remains one of history's most profound acts of unity. The story is complete. In this quiet journey tonight, we drifted through the gentle echoes of the entire history of the Silk Road. We moved from the distant whisper of silk and jade and the soft formation under the Han dynasty through the turning points of the Sasanian and Mongol empires and the final enduring legacy of technological diffusion. We followed the rhythm of the caravan from its earliest beginnings to the soft traces they leave behind in the foundations of our interconnected world. The story of the Silk Road reminds us that the most significant forces in history are often the quietest: the desire for beauty, the need for trade, and the persistent human drive to share ideas. It teaches us that political boundaries are temporary, but the thirst for connection is eternal, carried softly on the wind. If this peaceful journey brought you ease, you may leave a soft like or whisper in the comments where you'd like to drift next. And now, let the night grow still. Let your breath slow. May sleep come softly and carry you into peaceful rest. Good night.